Three, two. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe and Wandering Quill. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Scribe and Wandering Quill. Today, we have another historian's interview. And let me tell you a little story about our guest today. My guest is a proud mother of two, a military spouse, and currently living in the beautiful Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
Living in the Carolinas inspired her to go back to school and complete her bachelor's in history. She is a homeschool mama, and when she's not running around with the kids to sports or out exploring with them, she likes to go to the gym or hang out at the beach. Her passion is history and genealogy, and she loves to read historical genres like biographies and historical fiction. She likes to search archives and loves to visit one of the old plantations, battlefields, or any of the other historical gems found in America. She also runs a historical social media page called Historical USA that focuses on America's founding period. She loves to share the history of this great country with others. So let's give a big, warm welcome to a first timer on the podcast, historian Lisa Weakland. Lisa, thank you so much for joining
Hey,
us today.
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So let's just dive into the first question.
All
Tell us
right.
about yourself and your journey into this period right now in your life.
You've covered quite a bit of it. I am a military spouse. We moved quite a bit. We were stationed in South Carolina for a number of years, and that's kind of where this story begins. I am I grew up, born and raised in the Southwest in Arizona, and so there's not a whole lot of Revolutionary War or even Civil War history out there. It's
Right.
a fairly new state, comparatively. And
Hmm.
so, for me, I've always had a passion for history, but it was kind of more geared towards European history.
Hmm.
The
Okay.
world wars. That's kind of I took AP European history in high school, loved it. I was fascinated with the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and kind of ignored the American Revolution. And it wasn't until I moved to South Carolina that I really realized that I might be a history buff, but I sorely lacked an education and understanding of
Hmm.
America's founding. There's 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. At that time, I could probably only name 10 if I was lucky,
Right.
and there's even more signers of the United States Constitution. And I realized I didn't know anything about these men other than what was insinuated or, discussed either in on social media. And I thought there has to be more to the founding of America than what we're being told now.
Right.
And so it really just kind of became a project of mine to start Historical USA. This was my hobby. With about a year after I started that, I went back to school and got my history degree, um, which also helped me to kind of further my research and dig a little deeper. Uh,
Right.
and then I've been doing Historical USA since 2019. I graduated from college in 2020. Uh,
Congratulations.
oh no, I'm sorry, 2021. And
Oh, almost around the same time as me.
yeah, and so I was like, okay, well, now what do I do with this? And I had already been, like I said, I already been doing, Instagram and Facebook. And I thought, I was listening to another podcaster who was talking about his process and getting things started. And I thought that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a passion project of mine and tell and research a historical narrative on America. And so that's
Nice.
kind of what I've been doing since January. I started it in December, researching, colonial America is where we're at right now. We're just getting into the French and Indian War. So if you follow me on YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, Substack, I'm kind of all over the place. You'll notice a series that I do, which is called Historical USA Road to Revolution, Season 1.
Ooh, I
So this
like it.
is the we start off with the social movements, the Enlightenment, the Great Awakening, and we start delving into some of the conflicts. How did the relationship between the Native Americans and the European settlers either solidify or devolve so quickly? So we kind of start there. There's going to be a lot of wars people have never heard of: the Pequot War, King William's
Yes.
War, King Philip's War. A lot of kings and queens are warring here at this time, and they're
Right.
kind of they're named after each new monarch. It kind of seems whenever Europe gets a new monarch, there's a new war that the North
Right.
Americans have to deal with, whether they're native, whether they are enslaved or colonists themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever is happening in Europe in the 16th and 17th century is also playing out in North America in a very bloody and brutal fashion. So that's kind of what we're exploring. And I think that as you're watching it, people are starting to realize why George Washington and our founding fathers are so opposed to European wars. Sorry.
Oh, you have the same thing as I did.
Yeah, that national alert system. I thought I had turned my thing down, but I guess not. They had, I don't know. This is the second one. I thought they were going to do one, but this is the second. Sorry about that. I don't know if you
Oh
might
no,
hear that
it's
in there.
fine. You're good.
But yeah, so I think you can kind of see why George Washington's in his farewell address is stay out of Europe's affairs, because we've already had 250 years of having to deal with European wars in North America. So
Right.
so yeah, so it's been a a passion project of mine. It has been so much fun to research and to uncover this kind of, I don't want to say hidden history, because I don't think it's intentionally been hidden, but stuff that's not focused on, stuff that's kind of
Right.
lost, that has fallen on the wayside, because now we are a country 250 years of being a country. It is difficult, I think, when you are in school for a social studies teacher to pack all that stuff in a
Mm-hmm.
year. So this has been a lot of fun for me, and I'm really excited to see kind of where it continues to go.
Yes, and I've watched a few of your videos. I've commented on some of them. They are really, really good. And as you said, you do a lot of research into telling this very, very narrative story, which is very informative, educational, but also very entertaining. So
Thank you.
let's peel back the layers. Thank you. Um, how would you say your love of history came about? Did you always have a passion for history growing up, or did that kind of come later in life by like a teacher, a family member, or just by accident?
I think I think it was probably a combination of family and teachers. I've always been so fascinated with true stories. Um, I think that for me, I learned very early on that the truth is stranger than fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say probably about third grade was really kind of where the passion began to form. I had a great teacher, Miss Knight. She was a really wonderful teacher. She had assigned us a project in the third grade of presidents. And
Ooh,
I
okay.
really wanted Abraham Lincoln, and I ended up getting James Garfield. And I
Ooh,
was
all
like,
right.
who is James Garfield? Nobody even knows who this guy is.
Yeah,
You know,
that's true.
I had never heard of him. I thought he was a cat. I mean, we were just kind of like, there's a president named James Garfield. And I started kind of uncovering his history and realized, you know, for me, I always say he is my favorite president, because he is, I think, America's biggest missed opportunity. If he had survived, I think the civil rights movement would have been in 1890 and not 1960.
Ooh,
Uh,
okay.
he was one of the, radical Republicans. He was a half-breed Republican, and he was shot by one of the stalwart Republicans, a member of his own party, an insane individual named Godot, who shot him because he wanted to be the ambassador of France. He felt like he was owed that position. Um, and he was shot at the Baltimore train station in Washington, D.C., which is gone. He was assassinated. He was one of 4 presidents assassinated in office. He died. He was shot about 150 days into his first term, lingered for months in just excruciating pain, and eventually succumbed to his injury. But he is, of all of the 4 that have been assassinated in office, there is no monument to the spot where he was assassinated. The train station no longer
Really?
exists in Washington, D.C. They did put up a plaque on the street where the train station was about 2 or 3 years ago, but that plaque is to be removed in a few years. So unlike Abraham Lincoln, you can go to Ford's Theater, and it's now a museum.
Right.
And across the street at the Peterson House, they have a huge museum for him. McKinley, they have a monument in New York where he was assassinated, and of course JFK. If you go to
Mhm.
Plaza, there's quite a bit memorializing
Right.
John F. Kennedy. But Garfield gets a little plaque about a century after his death. And I think that's kind of sad. But I have heard that his home is very beautiful and very well maintained by the National Park Service. So I do hope to get out there. But yeah, so I was at 3rd grade, I was given that task by my teacher, and it really kind of opened my eyes to just how interesting history really is. And then at the same time, I didn't have cable growing up. And so, and this might date me a little bit, but I didn't have cable growing up. So we had PBS. PBS
Right.
was free. And every Sunday night, they had the American Experience documentaries
Oh,
on
okay.
PBS. And I remember they had a special. So American Experience would do special documentaries. And this one that they had coming out in particular, it was called House Divided. And it explored the relationship between Abraham Lincoln and his wife, Mary Todd. And
Mm.
Mary Todd was from Kentucky, and her family sided with the Confederacy.
Right.
2 of her brothers end up dying during the war, fighting for the Confederacy. Her father sided with the Confederacy, and the American public, the Unionists, didn't trust her. They thought she was a spy. Mary Todd had a very difficult public life. But I remember asking my mother, I said, "Can I please stay up late and watch this?" And I
Right.
think it was on like at 9 o'clock at night. And my mom, like, "What do you do?" Like, no. My mom was like, yeah, sure, you can stay up and watch a documentary on Abraham Lincoln." And so I remember, and the weird thing was, I decided I wanted to take notes. So I
Ooh,
ended up
okay.
taking these notes on like a graph paper. It was like everything I was told about Abraham Lincoln's childhood and their relationship and their marriage and the struggles that they had. I wanted to remember that. So I wrote them down. And I have those notes. Actually, I never did anything with them. I wrote them down as I watched it, but they stayed in my mom's living room. And they stayed there for about 15 years. So they were in like a console. We had a huge sectional, and there was like a television console that you could put like the remote and stuff in there. And they were kept in there. And my mom just kept them in there. And every so often I'd pull them out and read through it and put them back in there. But yeah, so I think early on that was kind of what inspired me. And then I just wanted to know more about everything. I would get on the internet, which was new. It's 98, 99. That, you to get on the internet in the late 90s was like nobody was calling you for a few hours. So I'd get yelled at, "Lisa, get off the internet. Don't," I'd print out stuff on people that I was interested in. I would print out stuff on Marie Antoinette because very early on I was very interested in the French Revolution and kind of how that played out. And I would get stuff off of, um, battles of the Civil War I had heard about. And then I saw Gettysburg, and then it was like, oh, okay, well, now I need to know about Gettysburg. And then it's just like, yeah. So, I mean, it just from there, I've always just had a love for history.
Nice. And it's actually glad you almost brought up like a lot of my guests always brought up like a teacher that really, really like inspired them. So that's really cool. It's actually almost very parallel to me. I actually a little bit different. I actually wasn't interested in history growing up. I actually wanted to be an illustrator and an artist.
Oh yeah.
But when I went to actually not middle school, high school, well, actually no, going back to middle school, I always remember historical dates. I was always that person, and everyone wanted me on their team for the historical Olympic Games because I could remember everything. It was a ridiculous superpower that I had. Then going into high school, I had a teacher. Shout out to Miss Singleton. She was my AP US history teacher, and from there, I had a new love that I wanted to explore. I loved history. I loved U.S. history, and then that evolved from military history to Chinese history, which I got my bachelor's in, and
Mm.
now with classical history as my master's. And then now I research all kinds of history: Islamic history, Spanish history, medieval history, colonial history. It is very fascinating. I'm actually glad you actually brought up the point of taking notes for those documentaries. I actually remember those. I was actually a young kid in the late 90s, early 2000s. And for me, the one show I had was, you may remember, Liberty Kids.
Oh
I remember
yeah.
watching Liberty Kids. I even watch it now because it was so fun and it was very, very informative. And tying it back to your podcast on Instagram and now on YouTube, when you began this venture in your life, what were the initial responses like, the feedback on Instagram from the comments, as well as the shorts on YouTube and your full-fledged videos on YouTube? What was the feedback like?
Okay, well, I will say, knock on wood, I think I have been very lucky on the internet as far as like trolling goes. I haven't gotten a lot of that. Only very rarely have I had to like turn off comments or confront,
Mm,
racists or just trolls online. Very rarely. But I will say, for me, I'm I'm probably the only one in my family. I do have an uncle that has a master's in history who is fun to talk to, but he's on the other side of the country.
right.
But I very very few members of my family kind of understand this level of passion for history. Um, understand why it's so fascinating. My husband, I love him to death, but this history is not really his big thing. He's not into the Roman Empire. I mean, it's like you ask him, he's like, I never think about the Roman Empire ever. It's like me, I think about it daily, but my husband's like, no, why would I think about that at all? And so I really another reason why I started Historical USA is because I wanted to find other people that were interested in history, that wanted to talk about it, that were interested in learning about it, that were interested in having those discussions. And um, I would say that I've got a lot of I have a great community. They're my followers, the people who have subscribed to me, other creators that are I would now call very good friends. Um, to build up that historical community that I was lacking of people, like-minded people, has been
Right.
really wonderful. So yeah, for me, it was, I started Historical USA because I wanted to find those people, and those people have found me. And so it's been wonderful. And I would say it was definitely one of the best things I ever did, for sure.
Nice. Very nice. So when you began this journey and you started making content, did you have a promise that you were going to make to the people watching your content? Because I'm sure that you may have seen, like, either on Instagram or YouTube, historical content is a very, very small category on like the digital platforms. I mean, yes, you have the Armchair Historian, you have Monsignor Z, you have Alternate History Hub on YouTube, and many more. But when you go on Instagram, it's a very, very different, because then you have people, which I have seen, who do these takes on, conspiracy history or different types of history for a specific audience, whether it's true or not of what they're telling. So for you, what is your ultimate goal and promise you're making to people who come to view your content for the very first time?
As far as the promise that I'm making to people, for me, it's I would say that promise and that goal is probably met more with my podcast than my
Right.
Instagram. Instagram is kind of all over the place.
Right.
It is, more like today in history kind of stuff, short
Ah,
form
okay.
videos, quotes, historical quotes. You get a little tidbit of things here and there, but you don't get a full picture. You aren't going to get a lot of deep dives with Instagram. And I think that is kind of unfortunate. And to your point, there are a lot of people that are making a name on social media through misinformation or just bad history.
Right.
And not that it's not true history sometimes, but it's severely lacking context
Yes.
to fulfill either I call it rage farming, to fulfill your audience full of a certain emotion that you want
Mm-hmm.
them to find. I especially find it with race baiting a lot in a
Mm.
historical context. That they'll say something about this, and they'll neglect, how it got that way or why it's like that. You have to understand why something happened in order to change or
Right.
prevent something from happening in the future, right? You learn science. You can't just go into science messing with hydrogen and peroxide and bleach and all these
No.
things. You have to understand how these elements have worked together, how they have dangerously worked together, how they have worked together for their good. You have to understand those compounds in order
Right.
to either carry out an experiment successfully, or so that you don't avoid injury to yourself in the future.
Mm.
History is the same way. You can look at history, and George Orwell, I mean, I think he probably said it best in 1984. You can take and handpick things from history to create a narrative of emotion and misinformation that you want to push onto people for
Mm-hmm.
whatever gain. Okay. There's a lot of people make money off of different political narratives, religious narratives, what have you. There is a lot of things like that. People are trying to prove a point, and sometimes they don't care if their point is necessarily true or not.
Right.
So, for me, I would hope that you come to my page. I think that, you know, it's impossible for a historian to hide their worldview. I will say that. So you need to acknowledge that if you're going to be a reputable historian. I have a Christian worldview. So that is the lens that I look through, right?
Right.
So usually those are the narratives that I want to cling on to. If your worldview is a very secular, atheistic worldview, you're gonna, latch on to, oh, all of the founding fathers were deists. Well, they weren't. Benjamin Franklin was, and Thomas Paine certainly was an atheist, but George Washington was not a deist. Thomas Jefferson was a theist. He was not a deist. But see, those kind of things I think are dangerous.
Right.
When you take those labels and you put them on certain historical narratives and say, this is how it was, not what you've been saying, in 20 years. So it's like you have competing narratives, and the historian's job, or should be their job, is to sift through both sides of the argument and find what the truth is.
I 100% agree. And I think that's probably the biggest struggle for historians nowadays is that, yeah, when we look at history and examine history, we do come with a background of either, how we've been taught to study history, our own worldviews, and we're going to approach it in this way. But we also have to acknowledge that's how we're going to approach it. And I definitely think the issue with studying history, which I think you may have thoughts on, is labeling and defining things in the past based on modern standards. It's impossible, especially if you go back to the classical period. I remember in my Roman class, my professor, Professor Campbell, said, the Romans engaged in a whole bunch of what was the term he used? Debauchery and so forth, but we cannot give them the modern labels because to them those labels haven't even existed. Okay, I'll give you an example. In Greece, we know we have terms of male lovers in Greek society, or the role of the male lover in Greek culture or Roman culture. However, that concept can't be the same as what it is in the modern sense. It is very different. But I definitely think it is important that we do have to talk about history unbiased in the context what it is, and we have to let people take the history as it is. Our
Yeah.
job is to just tell the truth and just present it.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, like I told you I had just released 2 videos on slavery in colonial America.
Yes.
And, I think that in particular with that, we have been told that slavery was this way, was one
Right.
specific way. And I think most people kind of look at it as antebellum South.
Yes.
But when you get into the history of slavery and how it got here, it really doesn't become about race until the 18th century.
Right.
There's a lot of nuance there and a
Hmm.
lot of understanding. I mean, blacks were allowed to own slaves as well, and so were Native Americans. They were buying and selling and trading along with whites and other black individuals. And I
Right.
think those are narratives that it is very unpopular to talk about those things because we into modern standards have crafted um, a narrative around what that was.
Mm.
And that narrative cannot be questioned or challenged. And I think more historians are coming out and challenging certain narratives that have been pushed politically for certain reasons,
Right.
and they should, and that should. You should always constantly challenge and question anything on what you're being taught. When it especially when it comes to the classics, I mean, we are uncovering things all the time. It just like the biblical age. It's like they're uncovering new sites archaeologically
Right.
wise. I mean, things are being uncovered, new information is being presented, new perspectives are being looked at, which I think is really important. And as historians, I think we should open our minds to that and explore those things and not just accept certain truths.
100%. And that kind of leads into the next question is, when you create your content on YouTube, do you do it with sort of like an audience in mind, or do you do it for yourself as if this is what you wish you'd learn growing up?
When I am crafting my script, I try to do it more entertaining because I definitely want people to not just be given dry facts.
Right.
And there is a human story to all of these things. And I
Hmm.
really try to kind of present those human elements, especially when you're talking about military history, right? Which is kind of where we're at right now with the French and Indian War. It's easy to
Yes.
get bogged down in military movements. It's easy to get bogged down in facts and figures.
Hmm.
This amount of people died. What's not as easy to do is to craft the story, maintaining the historical integrity, right?
Right.
So for me, it's kind of like I each episode I like to try and attach to either an issue or a person. So, um, for the first 2 episodes of the French and Indian War, that's pretty easy. It's easy to attach those episodes to George Washington because
Right.
he is such a central figure to how that event kind of snowballed and began, right?
Right.
He is a young, untested military commander. He's never had experience out in the field. He's had a lot of life experience up to that point as a surveyor, um, as someone, traipsing through the wilderness, but he doesn't understand the politics. He doesn't understand the economy. He doesn't it's he's kind of realizing that what he's been taught about the Native Americans, what he knows about the Native Americans, is severely lacking to what their culture actually is. And
Right.
so for those 2 episodes, it's easy to kind of craft the story around him. So that's something that I try to do. Like King William's War, I
Mm-hmm.
focused a lot on Hannah Duston and Madeline Verscheers. These are 2 women on the frontier whose stories I think kind of get lost, because I also
Right.
kind of wanted to look at King William's War. I could have looked at it through just the Deerfield massacres and or I'm sorry, not the Deerfield massacres, but I could have looked at it, as the Iroquois attacking Boston, Hannah Duston,
Yes.
and there's a lot of different ways to do that. But I latched on to Madeline Verscheers and Hannah Duston's stories because, 1, I'm a woman, and 2, I'm a mother, and 3, how would I feel if I found myself captured um, and in the wilderness, or if I found myself the only capable person of defending my home and my family.
Right.
Um, so I want to try those. I want to find those human elements to history and bring those to light. One of my favorite things to do is find the uncovered, unsung heroes,
Right.
because we do get bogged down in facts and figures.
Yes.
And so I really wanted to bring people to the forefront of the story along with the historical facts.
Awesome. I'm actually glad you do that because I 100% agree. When we think of like the French and Indian War, the general public will probably say like, yeah, that's the war that sort of, well, it is the war that sort of like breeds the foundation for what would be the American Revolution. But there's a lot of buildup to 1754. We have the disastrous Braddock expedition. We have George Washington's famous account of being denied a commission by the British, which a lot of historians I've talked with have stated that that's truly what would have been the what if scenario for the United States. Had Washington gotten a commission by the British and treated as a British subject, the idea of an American Revolution, it probably may have still come about later, but it probably would not have been like very directly right after the French Indian War. And then, of course, we tend to think of, the British kind of beating the French in the war. And that's not the case. The French were dominating up until the disastrous massacre, which has been glorified in the Last of the Mohicans story and the films of Fort William Henry.
Hmm.
And that's truly the rallying cry for the British to say never again. And that's where we get the idea of the British just steamrolling over the French. And it's not just solely the American colonies, it's all across the world. It was truly the first World War, some would argue. So it is a very fascinating story. And that's why I love, as you said, there's a lot of other human stories that are in this global conflict. Because if you look at those global stories, you get an insight into what exactly was going about in the daily life of people and truly what was happening in society. So that is really, really fascinating. And I could imagine there's some like awe-inspiring moments when reading these stories to get your scripts ready.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said earlier, this, when you are looking how much involved Europe is with North America and dictating the lives of these colonists across the ocean, you can see where, when they're forming the country, we're not going to do that again. I also think, it's really interesting that you say that because, first of all, that's what I'm researching right now, the Bloody Morning Massacre, Fort William Henry, with
Mhm.
Robert Rogers and his, Rangers. Um, but when I sat down to really kind of decide how I wanted to do this, I could have started with the Mayflower. And I might do a video on the Mayflower. I could have started with Roanoke, and I might do a video with Roanoke, but I feel like those are they're the beginnings, but they're also separate, because I wanted to uncover the events. I wanted to start with the events that would have affected George Washington's generation
Right.
and um, Thomas Jefferson's generation. I definitely wouldn't put them in the same generation because George Washington's a lot older. But
Right.
I wanted to figure out how these events affected the generals that would be commanding our forces. John Stark, Daniel Morgan, um, Robert Rogers, who
Right.
he tries to join the Continental Army and is denied because he's a raging alcoholic and has a
Hmm.
lot of mental issues. Um, Horatio Gates. These are what these guys are learning. They are learning right now how to fight the American Revolution in the French and Indian War. And so that's very important to uncover. And then, of course, yeah, George Washington is seeing that he's being denied, but you have to remember he when they throw the tea over Boston in Boston Harbor, he writes a letter, condemning the Sons of Liberty. So he's not totally on board. So we're going to see, some of these guys, their attitudes are going to change in the next decade in the 1760s because they're not all in on revolution for a good 15 years like Paul Revere and Dr. Joseph Warren are. They're not ready for that. And so I'm excited to uncover how those attitudes start to change. And I think that's probably the most that I'm excited about, just trying to figure out, how we rolled down that road, how we got to revolution, because it didn't just go French and Indian War, Stamp Act, Boston Tea Party, Boston Massacre. There's a lot of things that are happening that are building up to that point. And it's not just about the
Apology.
taxes. No, you're fine. It's not just about taxes. It's about a lot of um, social issues that are happening. And I'm really excited to unpack them because I think it's just really, really a fascinating story.
The French and Indian War to the Revolution is same with the Mexican-American War for the Civil War and World War I to the generals of World War II. They all got their starting points. So it's truly fascinating to see that. And I can't wait for that video to come up soon, or videos, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also remember, I don't know if I said this, I also do vlogs. So I've got some vlogs that are coming out. So I'm not just, this is, like I said, Road to Revolution is my passion project, but I love going to historical spots. So I do bring those, home and publish vlogs on those. I just went to Gettysburg. We just went out to Arizona.
Ah,
Um,
lucky.
so I did go to San Javier de Bac, which is in Tucson on the Tohono O'odham Reservation. It's one of the oldest buildings in America, not just colonial America, but America. It was established in 1700 by Padre Quino, Escobar Quino. And so we're going to show you that. It's a very Spanish Catholic church in the middle of the desert of Arizona. So there's a lot going on. I've got, more than just the podcast and everything. And yeah, so it's been a really joy running Historical USA, I will say.
Awesome. Now here get to the more like serious questions.
Okay.
So as you know, being a historian is a very, very time consuming work. It's a very, very kind of a lonely work. If I've been talking with a lot of other historians, you're devoting a lot of time and passion to a project. It's very, very hard to find employment as an historian. You have to venture out into other fields, whether it's writing, archival work, photography, or any kind of field. And it will be a little deflating to say, like, well, what can I do as an historian? Because I felt that. I have tried to find numerous employment as just like an historian, but I realized I had to branch out. So I guess, Lisa, in like those like private thoughts that you may have had or may have thought about, what pushes you to continue your passion? What is your what and what is your why?
Um, what pushes me is that's a really good question. I just feel like there's a drive. I have to share it. I just have to. I I cannot stay quiet on the things that I'm learning. because I feel it would be something that I would be doing regardless. Right. I
Right.
am a stay-at-home mom. I am a homeschool mom, so for my kids, this is also something that benefits them as well. Uh, we have gone to a lot of really amazing places. They have watched a lot of my videos. They've learned a lot of things. Um,
Nice.
and other homeschool moms watch my videos too. And I have had teachers that watch my videos and say that they've shown them to their classes. And,
Oh, wow.
for me, that makes it all worth it. Right. And so, my kids are one of the reasons why I do what I do. Now if I wasn't lucky enough to have the, financial stability, my husband, that, I am home and I have the time to do this. Um, if I wasn't doing this, I probably would be bored.
Right.
And so for me, this has been my hobby, my passion. Lately I've been trying to take it up to that next level of trying to, make it into a business, make it into something. Um, which I've always been scared to do, to be honest, because, business, I didn't go to school for business. I went to school to be a historian, and
Right.
taking that other level and trying to monetize your work and, feeling like you deserve that has been really difficult, because this is something that I just absolutely love doing and I would do for free. And I've probably given too much away for free, to be honest, for all of my time and
Right.
effort. Um, but if I didn't have kids and I was trying to pursue a career with my history degree, I'd still be doing this, but I would probably pursue that in politics, to be honest. Um,
Okay.
because I've always been fascinated with political science and psychology. And I think that the study of history is very important. Like I said, you have to learn, the basics of how things work, right? And so politics is also just learning the history, learning data. It's like, for me, this past election has been really an interesting study in political science with uh, Joe Biden. What he did was kind of more of a front porch type campaign. And it's like, as I'm watching that, I'm going, that is what Garfield did, and those things had to have been learned on how to
Right.
approach that part of campaigning. And I've always been fascinated with political history. So if I wasn't, home and I wasn't doing this, I'd probably, be in politics in some fashion, whether it's, working in Congress, and I actually thought about doing that, getting a job in Congress, because
Ooh.
history, they will hire historians, because like I said, it's a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
Those congressmen, they have to craft their speeches somehow. And let me tell you, a lot of them don't know history. So they'll have their aides go out to the library, or they'll
Yes.
contact the
Yes.
Library of Congress and, we need to research this and write this, and we need to understand what we're talking about before we go out there and make our arguments. And so I probably would have done something in politics if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now. Um, but, even if I did go out and get a job at the Library of Congress or the House of Representatives or the US Senate or something like that, I would still do this, because, like I said, this right now, what I'm doing, Road to Revolution, all of it, this is my passion project. This is for me. And it's something that I wanted to do. I try to make it enjoyable. I would hope that there is an audience of people that want to tag along and learn with me. But yeah, no matter what I would have ended up falling into, I would have always probably come back to doing what I'm doing right now.
Awesome. And I know the struggle. I know the struggle. When I first started doing podcasting, it was actually probably when I got out of my master's program. I initially, wanted to go straight into work as a historian, but it wasn't easy. I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And I did podcasting on the side with my friends who were independent writers. And that kind of branched into a podcast, which was season 1.
Mhm.
And then in season 2, I decided to combine my love for history and writing, which was season 2. And I met a whole bunch of people who have allowed me to make new connections, new friendships. And that's giving me the courage to jumpstart Tales from the Wandering Quill, which is technically the unofficial slash official season 3 of Wandering Scribe, and it's fascinating. And it is right. It is. We're doing this for free. We are making content. We are doing this because this is what we love to do. We
Mm-hmm.
would love to be doing other stuff with our like passions, like for history, like as you said, working in Congress or the Library of Congress or some form of government. I would love to be a full-time writer, historical writer. But even if that was the case, I'd still be doing this because I love this and it is
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. And I get to meet a whole bunch of people like yourself, Lisa. I love doing this because I learned so much from people. And I'm pretty sure you would agree that that has also happened to you with making this podcast. You've probably come in contact with a lot of other people that may not do history podcasts, but still do podcasts nonetheless, who have may given you some tips and tricks of, how can you help with the editing or what thumbnails can you do, like the transitions. And I'm sure that's been very beneficial to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it has like I said, the history stuff is easy. It's learning, the technical stuff. It's learning how do I want to set certain things up. I mean, I've had to restart my YouTube channel, um, kind of reboot because I'm learning. It's all a
Right.
learning process and trying to figure out what works best for you. What works best for someone else might not work for you at all.
Hmm.
Um, and so for me, it's kind of more of like, you know, it, it has been a lot of trial and error. I am not uh very good with this kind of stuff. If you are like armchair historian, the history guy, these are guys that have been doing this for years now. They've
Yes.
gone through those growing pains. They've gone through the, okay, this isn't working. I've got to figure something else out. Um, they've done that and they've grown it and they know their audience and their audience is loyal to them. And right now people are just looking for me. They're either following me along from Instagram or they are finding me now on YouTube, and it's kind of now I'm rebuilding a audience on YouTube and Spotify. And so yeah, it's a whole different ball game. And it's a lot of learning and understanding. And
Hmm.
on top of having to research for your episodes and making sure that those are good, I feel a little like I got shot in the leg and I'm trying to like play catch up because I
Right.
know the history stuff, I can do that, but I don't know the editing. I don't know how these algorithms work. I'm trying to understand YouTube and what they want, and SEOs and all these things that aggravate me at times. Um, but yeah, so it's nice to have a community of friends that are also doing the same thing, so you can bounce off of each other. Hey, did this work for you? I don't know
Right.
how to do this. How do I do this? And I'm always game to help out other creators, if they see something that I've done and they go, that looks really cool, how do I do that? I mean, I'm always game to help other people out because I think the more we have, the more we build a community, I think the more we all benefit from that. So,
100%. That kind of leads into my next question, which is, who would you say has been like your biggest role model in terms of learning history and also how you like to present history? Because I know almost like with authors, we always have like a style that we're always inspired by, whether we want to write like J.K. Rowling or C.S. Lewis. So for you, who has really inspired you to like present history in like a certain way, or like your approach to research in a certain way?
um, so for me, in terms of writing, I really enjoy Candace Millard's books. So I would probably say I try to emulate her form of storytelling in writing.
Hmm.
As far as the documentary medium, Mary Beard is one of my favorite. She's for classics, Roman historian. Love
Nice.
Mary Beard. I would say she is probably someone that I try to emulate without a British accent as much. I it's hard. It's also difficult because there aren't as many women in the space. So I have women who are friends that we do this, but as far as professionally, there aren't as many women out there doing these, especially talking about military history. You can find
Right.
women that are really interested in, the monarchy and royalty, but they're not going to sit down and talk with you about World War I and World War II.
Right.
So it is kind of weird because at times I feel like I know I'm not, but I do feel more alone in the space because I am a woman talking about military conflicts and some of these issues, especially early American issues. I don't think you see as many women doing what I'm
Mhm.
doing. So that I do have friends that are women. I would say Jen Walk with History, Sarah, the history chick, 1941. Those are women that are in the space that I gravitate to and are friends with. But the vast majority of it is men, and it does feel a little it's different. It's not, I don't want to say there's any kind of favoritism or anything like that, but it is different, getting your history from a woman, I think, than it
Right.
is from a man.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's like, we have like our, communities that we really enjoy learning from, but then we have those that are outside of our comfort zone. It's like, we're in the same field of like history, but like, how do we like connect if we're like two different disciplines? So I understand that and trying to find the common ground. But I think that's one of the beautiful things about history is that it does bring us together. It does bring this brotherhood because as I've learned from my professors, historians are like a small club. We are a very, very small group of individuals that work tirelessly to tell history in whatever format, whether it's border history, medical history, the history of food and culture, which that is a huge discipline of itself. And that's always the beautiful thing.
Mhm.
And I have to agree, making those connections and finding those people that we really trust kind of like eases the idea of like being alone in history because you're
Yeah.
not truly alone. You have people that enjoy the same things as you do and will always help you in some ever way they can.
Yeah,
Yes, which
for sure.
actually then kind of leads into the next two questions, which I also think are very important. Before we get into like the final ones, who would you say have been like your biggest supporters on your journey? And have you had a moment of validation from others in the historical community, be it on YouTube or Instagram, or do you not look for self-validation?
Um, could you repeat that question one more time?
Okay, so I'll start with the first one. So, who have been your biggest supporters of your journey?
So, well, clearly my family, my husband and my children have been the biggest supporters. There are a few people that have um, been with me on Instagram since the very beginning and have been very encouraging. And these people I don't even know. Um, for me, like I said, the best validation I could ever receive from doing this is when I have people who are saying that my work is inspiring to them, that either seeing another female that is doing this is something that's very encouraging, or when I have a homeschool mom that says they showed their video to their kids, or when a teacher says that they showed their video to my kids, when my stuff is being used to teach, that's all the validation I could ever ask for, and
Nice.
that's kind of what keeps me going. Because let me
Right.
tell you, if it was the money or professional recognition, you're not going to get that a lot of times from YouTube.
No.
So, but if I can inspire people and these videos can be used to teach people, or another thing that I really love is when my videos inspire a mature, I want to say mature discussion.
Mhm.
I cannot tell you how over the moon that makes me. I posted a little video about General Longstreet, James Longstreet, and just the back and forth of sharing what people knew about him was
Right.
like one of my favorite things ever, because I want people to have that dialogue. I want them to, talk about the things you liked about somebody, things you didn't like about somebody, or an event, or a period of time, or, if you have information that I missed, I mean, I'm one person. I usually have about 30 minutes for an episode. And,
Right.
there's just so much history that you might know something that I don't, and you share that in the comments. That never offends me, as long as you're doing it respectfully, but it never offends me. I love that when people can add to what I'm saying. Um, and that a true discussion can form. That's like my favorite thing ever. So,
Awesome. And this actually perfectly leads into probably like the most important question, which right now is in the final section, which is Lisa. What is your word of wisdom to those who are fellow historians who want to take their passion into something and make it into like a new venture, or for young women who wish to be historians? What is your advice to them?
persevere. Don't give up. Don't be afraid to change things around. If something isn't working out, try something else. Don't stop before you got started. Don't feel like whatever you're doing is overwhelming. Um, that I think that would be my first thing. Don't give up. Don't give up. If this is something you want, if this is something you're passionate about, um, you might have to tweak things every so often. And
Right.
believe me, there has been a lot of times where I've had to tweak things, where I've had to, you know, either start completely over, or I've had to admit mistakes. I mean, you are not perfect. This is a new medium. Most people are starting out, unless you are, someone that's going to invest time into, somebody that knows this and put a lot of money into it. But don't be afraid to start. Don't be afraid, of what people might think. Um, don't be embarrassed, but above all else, persevere. And if what you know that you're doing is something that you want to do, something that you're passionate about, don't be afraid to take the step to do it.
Awesome. That is beautifully said. And this, I think, is a perfect point to conclude this wonderful interview. And before we officially close out here on The Wandering Quill, I want to say thank you to our guest, Lisa, for joining us. Lisa, thank you so much for providing your insight and for being here. Where can people find and engage with you? They want to know more about your content or any upcoming projects down the road.
You can follow me on YouTube at Historical USA, Rumble Historical USA. I'm on rumble.com. I'm on Substack Historical USA. I am on Instagram, TikTok, Threads. I'm trying to think everywhere I'm at. Historical USA.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description for you to follow Lisa. I urge you all to go and watch her Road to the Revolution series. It is a phenomenal series. It's really informative, truly professional. It's amazing. You will not be disappointed. And if many of you have been following me on my social media, you will also know that my historical book, Amnetus, Son of Persia, will be coming out next week in ebook and in print, so be on the lookout for that as well. Well, listeners, this concludes another wonderful historians interview here on the channel. Again, I want to thank our guest, Lisa, for joining us today. Make sure to follow her. You're welcome, Lisa. And until next time, this has been The Wandering Scribe and The Wandering Quill, signing out.